This is Excel 2016, Module 5, Part 5. We're continuing our work with Excel tables, and we're going to look at working with a total row. So let's get back into our workbook called June. We want to be back on the worksheet that says sales data. We also want to click within our June table to make sure that the table is the active object. You should see the Table Tools Design tab up on your ribbon. Remember, this is a contextual tab. So if you have not made the table active, you will not see it. So in our table design tab, we have this styles options. There's an option here for a total row. Before we click that, let's scroll all the way down. And if you look, this is the end of our table. The data just stops. Now we're going to add a total row. Notice when I did that, it immediately added the word, and it also built in some functions. When you are asked to add a total row to a table, they do not want you to come down here and manually type the word total and put formulas down here. They want you to come up to your ribbon and use this total row button. Now on the total row, we have functionality, so we can determine which formula we want to use. If you click the down arrow, you can see that in this particular field, we have a sum. We could have just as easily calculated an average or some other function based on the options that we have here. Do not try to go in here and say equals sum and start typing. You'll notice that it uses a different function. The subtotal function is assigned to the total row, and 109 tells it the formula that it's supposed to be using with it. That's what's telling it to use a sum. So you need to select your options from this drop-down arrow. Now you can also use drop-down arrows in other fields. It does not have to be only in a dollar amount field. So if I come to column B and I want to count all of the records, I can again use that drop-down arrow and pick a formula. When you use counts, you do have to be careful to select the correct one. For example, this top one, count, will count letters and numbers. Count numbers would only count the cell if it had numbers in it. So notice we get a 0 on count numbers. But if we wanted to see the number of records, we could choose count, and it would then tell us that there were 104. Now let's see how our total row works with filters. So I'm going to come up here to my slicer, and I'm going to say I want to see only the records 2. Notice the count changed, and so did the sum. to reflect the data that is visible that I am viewing. So if I change to a 1, hold down the control key and get a 5. So it added both of those. When I scroll down to my total row, you'll see again that total is updated. It works the same way. I'm going to clear my slicer. If instead of using my slicer, I were to come in here and use my filter arrows. So let's say I changed it to a 1, or let's say 2. You can see that you get the same result. If you happen to use the filter arrow here, and you have a slicer on that field, it highlights it over here in the slicer as well. If I chose to filter on this and said I only want to see the group homes, the slicer is not affected because I don't have a slicer on business, but notice the total and the number of records displayed does get updated based on that visual data. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the filters. That shows you the way the total row works. If you wanted to add more data, and so you removed the total row, and then you finished adding more data, the nice thing is when you bring the total row back, it has whatever calculations in it that were there when you removed it. So each time you add more data, you don't have to come in here and reset the formulas being used in your total row. Because when you turn it off, it maintains that information, and when you turn it back on, it will have it again. It would have obviously new answers based on the new data that you put in, but it would still be doing a count over here and a sum over here. So you would get the count in column B and the sum in column E. That takes care of working with our total row. The next thing we're going to look at is something called splitting the pane.